Ailsa MacDonald, welcome to the Single Track Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is the first time, that we're having you on this podcast. So I'd love to just learn a bit about your background, where you're based, what you do for work, how you got into ultras.
Okay, well, I'm based in Cochrane, Alberta, so just outside of Calgary. Um, I work I work as a plant operator in the oil sands. My work is 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It's camp based. So for the 2 weeks I'm on shift, I live up in a remote location in northern Alberta. So it adds a very unique challenge to my training regime. But I've been doing that for 10 years, so I've got it figured out now. As far as getting into ultras, it was kind of a gradual build. I started in my early 20s as a Olympic distance triathlete and kind of progressed from there into the marathon and then half Ironman and full Ironman, which is where I kind of discovered my talent for endurance events. And from there, I started to dabble into trail running, and then it just kind of took off.
Tell me a bit more about this plant operator job. Do you in the context of ultra running, do you find that it has any benefits to your training, like this 2 week on, 2 week off schedule and long days? Like, is it a lot of time on feet? Maybe just talk about any benefits you see there.
Oh yeah, it's a very physical job. Lots of time on feet. It's shift work, so I do 2 weeks of nights and then 2 weeks of days. It's 12-hour shifts, so it's it's tiring. I think that it does have a lot of advantages towards my training because I train at different times of the day all the time. I also eat and like my body's never in like a regular routine, which is kind of really ideal for ultras. I'm very adaptable in that respect, so I think it's actually served me well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like in a lot of ways, it's just interesting how work can be complementary to the training. Like, for example, I sit at a desk all day and I find that I have to do a lot of stuff to warm up my body to get ready for like the demands of a long run or workout. But in years past, when I've been more on feet, there's just been that like natural transition into whatever the activity is for the day. So I don't know. I find that fascinating. Can you talk a bit about this background in triathlons and Ironmans as well? Because I think the multi-sport world is super cool. Obviously, it allows you to train more each week compared to just exclusively ultra running. So maybe just talk a bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, primarily I was a triathlete. That's kind of what kicked off my whole career in sports. Growing up, I was always really big into cycling and running, not so much swimming, and I'm still really not that much into swimming. But I do really love the cross training, and I think that's why I was so attracted to the sport in the first place. And I think it has served me well because I don't have to do like really high mileage, and it keeps the impact down on the body, and it keeps things interesting. And I feel like I'm always in a good mind space because I'm not always training for the same thing. There's a lot of variety in my training. And the swimming, even though I find it very challenging, it's really good recovery exercise. And it's really easy on the body, and so it's been a good variety.
What made you ultimately want to pivot to a focus on ultra running?
I just like to constantly change things up, I think. I trained for Ironman for quite a few years, and in probably like my second or third year training for Ironman, I discovered a local ultra, Golden Ultra, which was a 3-day stage race, and that was kind of my first introduction to ultra running and trail running. And I was just kind of going into it to see what it was all about, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere. I loved the course. I loved running in the mountains, and I ended up doing really well. And it was just kind of I kind of discovered that I had a bit of a talent for the sport, and so I just kind of kept going.
It's cool. I'm always fascinated by the various ways you can enter into this sport. I mean, we've talked to people who've had success from a thru hiking background, from a lacrosse background, from, in your case, a triathlon background. It's super cool. Pivoting here to Western states, build up a little bit. I was scrolling through your Instagram and noticed you spend quite a bit of time in Arizona in addition to being based in Alberta. So maybe talk about that situation and how that came to be.
Well, My husband started working the same facility as me, like back in 2016. And so when we got on the same schedule, we decided that we weren't going to spend any more winters in Canada because they're pretty harsh. So we started traveling to Arizona on our time off. So we would come back to Canada to do our 2 week stints at work, and then we would go to Arizona to avoid the winter on our days off.
And obviously, this is a great way to train specifically for Western states, because in your case, if you had to spend the winter in Alberta, for example, I would imagine there'd be some concern as to whether you can get like the requisite heat training you need and like specificity from like a being on trails standpoint, stuff like that. So does that kind of check a lot of boxes for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely get the heat training in Arizona, and I probably could have done with staying down there a little bit longer because we're still having pretty crappy weather up here.
Yeah.
So as far as heat training, I haven't done a lot. I have an infrared sauna at home, so I've been sitting in that, and hopefully that will help.
Oh, cool. Actually, what like do you know the difference between like the wet saunas versus these infrareds? Like, is one better than the other in your opinion?
I haven't really compared them much, actually.
Okay.
I know that they're both really good for you, and there's a lot of health benefits. I do prefer actually a steam sauna because I find it's nice, especially living in a dry climate. You get a little bit of moisture and humidity into your skin. The infrared sauna was actually like way more feasible for at home.
Yeah. No, super cool. I love that stuff. Okay, you are a veteran of Western states, so this is not your first rodeo. You were here in 2018. Can you talk about that experience and maybe any of the lessons you're taking from that race and applying to this time around?
Yeah, for sure. I did Western States in 2018 after winning a golden ticket at Flat Canyon. It was my second 100 miler. And I went into it a little bit hot. I went out too hard, blew up early, and really fell apart. So my goal this year is to have a better race than I did in 2018. So just pace myself and run my own race. Don't worry about what the crowds are doing. Just stay in the moment and focus on how my body's feeling. And
if you're comparing like this block to the block in the build up to that race, do you think you're a better athlete at this point in time, or like better trained for the sport, stuff like that?
mentally, absolutely. Physically, I mean, I'm a little bit older now. Definitely recovery time takes a little bit longer now than it did a few years ago. But I have had a good build. I feel physically strong. I feel mentally stronger than I ever have. And
Yeah.
with the experience of 100 milers under my belt, I feel like I can really pull off a much smarter race than what I did in 20.
That seems like one of the awesome rewards of our sport that can only be earned with time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the longer you spend in the sport, there's just that like intangible factor that comes into play. That's really cool. Did you win a golden ticket in 2020 as well at Bandera? Is that how you got entry into this race?
Yeah.
And didn't race in 2021 though?
No, the border was still closed.
Gotcha.
So we still had that 2 week of isolation on the return. So it just wasn't feasible at the time to take that much time off work. And they gave us the option of rolling our entry, and it was just the smart thing to do.
Yeah. Well, this block has looked interesting to me because you've done quite a bit of road work, it looks like, and even you've dabbled in triathlon again. So talk about what led to that decision, like why you built this block the way you did.
Over the pandemic, I didn't really focus on speed work at all. I did tons of training and I was doing lots of adventures in the mountains, but typically, like, my winter always has some sort of road work or marathon build just to get in some speed work. And I like the discipline of training for a marathon. And because I hadn't done speed work for so long, I thought it would be a good time to do that. I had lost a lot of speed. I didn't have that high cadence, for the faster stuff. And going into Western States this year with the competition, I thought it would give me a nice confidence build to be a little bit faster.
What are your expectations for the race? Are you setting any goals for yourself, or like thinking about like race strategy this time around? Like obviously you mentioned earlier that maybe you'll take a more conservative approach, not go out as hot, but anything else beyond that?
Yeah, definitely just to run a smarter and better race than I did in 2018. I would love to place in the top 10, whether that's a possibility or not, I don't know. But still, I need to keep in the back of my head when I'm out there that I need to pace myself appropriately to the conditions and for the distance.
Are you somebody that like is incredibly attracted to the race, and if you get the chance, you want to keep doing Western States year after year, or are you someone that like kind of wants to run what you see as like a satisfactory race and then move on to some other challenge?
Honestly, I didn't even want to run this for the second time. um, I was pretty happy with my finish in 2018, even though even though I blew up and had a like struggled on the back half. I was really proud that I finished because it was probably my hardest fight yet when it came to any finish. Just keep moving when my legs were so sore and I was so worn down. It wasn't the time or the placement that I had hoped for that year, but I was still very grateful that I finished. But my husband and the other members of my crew they wanted me to go back and get redemption and execute a better race. So when I did Bandera in 2020, I actually signed up about a month before because I told my crew, I'm like, okay, well, if you guys want me to do it, I'll go for the golden ticket at Bandera. I don't care if I get it or not. I was doing it as a training race that year for Tarawera. So I just went in with like a super relaxed attitude, which I tend to do better when I go in with that kind of attitude. When my mind is at ease, I pace myself better and I just have a better day. So I ended up winning the golden ticket. So here we go again.
I think it's super cool, and there's a special place in my heart for people that race their way in the hard way, and you've done it twice. I mean, you got it in 2018, you got it in 2020. It's super cool. The last question that I have for you, what does your gear look like on race day? Like, what are you wearing for shoes? Do you have sponsors, stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm sponsored by Saucony Canada, so I'll be wearing the Terra Grind for the first probably 100K of the course, and then I'm going to switch to their new carbon shoe for the latter half, where it's a little bit less technical and less downhill.
Right on. How about like pack and stuff like that?
I use a Solomon pack with bottles. And that's about it.
Right on. Well, Ailsa, it has been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We're looking forward to following your race here in a couple days, and best of luck.
Thank you.